All right, thanks for your patience, everyone, and for all of our futzing around. We're trying to more consistently record and get things up on YouTube so that people who can't make it on an evening can get our content. So thanks for bearing with us. I'm John Crippen, Director of Hennepin History Museum. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. We're really thrilled to have Debra Stone here to talk about her book. Debra's retired from a career in community development, community organizing, and programming curriculum in youth development and service learning. That's a lot.
That is a lot.
Primarily at the University of Minnesota Extension Service and Department of Adolescent Health. She created collaborations with the university and neighborhood organizations, in particular in North Minneapolis and the Dayton's Bluff neighborhood of St. Paul. She's got deep roots in the African American communities of both Minneapolis and St. Paul, one of the themes of tonight. And she's the fifth generation to live in Minnesota Makoche. She currently serves on the board of Hennepin History Museum. We're so thrilled to have her with us. And has previously served on the boards of the Twin Cities Major Taylor Bicycle Organization, Grey Wolf Press, including as chair of that organization, several youth community gardens, and the African American Breast Cancer Organization. And of course, she's an author in her spare time. So Debra, thank you for sharing your talents with us tonight, and I'm going to pass it over to you to kick us off.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for showing up. I really appreciate it. I'm going to read from The House on Rondo. And first, I'd just like to say that it took me a while to put this book together. As you see, I've been quite busy. But once I got it going, it was just a labor of love. I really loved writing this book. So I would like to just start out reading kind of like the preface for this. Something was amiss in the summer of 1963. White men drew chalk arrows showing where gas, electric, and water lines ran. The men were sunburned red, wearing t-shirts stained with black dirt and sweat. The water main line broke, and water gushed everywhere, cracking the sidewalk and erasing the girls' game of hopscotch. Interstate 94 was coming through the neighborhood. Children were sent to bed while adults spoke with hushed voices and filled the air with curse words. Adults talked of having no political clout, of there being no use calling political representatives on the telephone. They did not have the kind of access to power that others had. Children saw anger and despair. It was clear no one on Rondo Avenue could stop the change about to happen. Neighbors organized to resist. But when Mrs. Ruby Pearl's doors and windows were nailed shut with plywood and marked for destruction, the steel cyclops with men in wire cages appeared, driving monsters with roaring engines and smashing teeth, splintering the wood frame house and shattering windows. Dump trucks carried off what remained as the neighbors faced their defeat. And who is telling this tale? The shattered bones of the houses on Rondo. Who else cares about the people uprooted again? We are to be remembered with dreams and hopes and laughter and pain and death that must not be buried in the dusty files of old office basements. We were the houses of Rondo, where those denied found sanctuary. We were the houses of blues and jazz and rock and roll and jitterbug dancing, where families applauded, celebrated, and praised themselves when no one else would. Our families are resilient, stronger than the bulldozers that struck down the houses of Rondo. We're still alive in the memory and hearts of those who will continue with their stories and mine. There are many stories, so forgive me if I dwell on this one family, this one girl with their highs and lows who lived in this house on Rondo Avenue. Thank you. Would you like me to read?
No, one more, sure.
One more, okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to read one more piece. This is going to be kind of a short one. So Zenobia is going to her grandparents' house because her mother has been ill and she had a stroke, and now she has to be in therapy, physical therapy. And in order for the family to get things done, her father works 3 jobs. So the grandparents who live on Rondo Avenue have decided to take care of the children. And it's summertime too. And Zenobia, who is our main character, is not happy at all. I mean, she was planning to be with her friends, going to swim in Glenwood Lake. I mean, everything was just poof, gone. But she loves her grandparents, and she made friends on Rondo Avenue. So I'm going to read a little section here about her grandma Essie, who has waited until Zenobia has returned so she can help make pound cake. Grandma Essie had waited until Zenobia arrived so she could help make the powdered sugar buttered frosting. In the pantry hung the apron Grandma had sewn for her. Zenobia stood next to Grandma Essie at the counter on a wooden footstool Grandpa Joe carved for her. Mookie and Fanny sat on chairs at the kitchen table, swinging their short legs in anticipation of the buttery frosting. The kitchen was small, with maple counters and steel cabinets that clanged when closed. The pantry shelves were lined with flour, sugar, colorful spices, canned yellow and green peas, apple butter, canned peaches, and tomatoes grown in Grandpa Joe's backyard garden. The stove and refrigerator were old, with rust forming along the handles. On top of the Formica kitchen table sat a set of silver and glass salt and pepper shakers shaped like tulips, a white butter dish, and a matching sugar bowl. Here's Zenobia. Use this cup for the powdered sugar. Fill it up to the top, then put it in the bowl. Grandma Essie never used store-bought measuring cups. For as long as Essie had been cooking and baking, she used the coffee cup with the broken handle for measuring and making the frosting for the vanilla pound cake. Essie wasted nothing, not even a broken dish. Now mix in the stick of butter while I pour in the milk. Grandma, can I pour? Not this time, baby girl. Last time you kind of made a mess, but I can do it. Oh, don't worry, sugar. You can make a mess some other time. Okay. Otherwise, how do you learn, right, Grandma? Essie nodded her head in agreement. Zenobia stirred until her arm ached. The frosting became smooth and runny. Grandma let her drizzle it on the pound cake as it sat on the counter. 3 spoons appeared on the counter, and Zenobia, Mookie, and Fanny scraped the remaining icing from the bowl, leaving it as clean as it had been washed. Grandma Essie, who taught you how to bake vanilla pound cake? My mama, just like I'm teaching you. It's easy making pound cake, Zenobia said. Grandma, you're named after your great-grandma. I bet you didn't know that. Who was great-grandma Zenobia? Why hadn't anybody ever heard of her before this? Zenobia thought. Really? Yes, okay. Butter, sugar, eggs, and flour, then add whatever you want. Like what? Well, some folks like to put some rum or lemon, some honey, or a dash of nutmeg. During hard times, we'd use margarine or less butter and add some sour cream. The sour cream made the cake moist, gave it a tangy taste too. Zenobia paused a moment. Grandma, can I ask you something else? Lord, child, more questions. I told you about the pound cake. What else? Can you tell me about great-grandma Zenobia? No, not now. Maybe later. First, I want you to take your suitcases upstairs and help your brother and sister get settled. You and Fanny have the bedroom on the top of the stairs, and Mookie is the one close to the bathroom. Then you all can go outside and play, but no messing around until then. Please, I want it done now. Why does everything have to be done now, thought Zenobia. Since she said now, there was no more asking questions, and Zenobia knew Essie didn't take to messing around. Zenobia didn't want to be the sassy girl. Grandma Essie didn't use switches unless her grandchildren had really done something bad, like play basketball in the living room, like Mookie did once. Or the time Fanny was caught with Grandpa Joe's matches that he used to light his cigars. As much as Zenobia liked to smell the lilacs in the spring, they also made a powerful switches. The sting of supple branches singing through the air was like a million mosquitoes attacking your legs. She'd rather hear Grandma give her a talking to and go on about she never raised her children to ask so many questions, and she'd continue her talking with, why on earth did you grandchildren have to act like I was some kind of Encyclopedia Britannica? Most children would be satisfied just to know and do as they were told without a lot of who shot John. This was Grandma Essie's favorite saying. Zenobia wanted to know and to ask, who shot John? And where did John come from? And why did he get shot? And why, or was he really shot? But she knew better because Grandma would say she was being sassy. Zenobia unpacked the clothes in her suitcase, put them in the drawers, and hung the good dress in her closet. She helped Fanny fold pedal pushers, blouses, underwear, socks in the drawers below. Fanny looked around the bedroom and decided to put Freddie on the shelf above the bed, and Zenobia placed her comics next to him. She knew Grandma didn't mind her reading them as long as she didn't leave them all over the house. Leaving Fanny and Freddie playing, Zenobia bounded down the stairs, through the dining room, into the kitchen, and announced, Grandma, I'm done. Child, no need to shout. You're not done. You're not in the oven. You're finished. Now, you may go outside.
Okay. So that was a great introduction to Zenobia and Grandma Essie. I think and soon we're going to meet Mrs. Ruby Pearl. These rich characters that you've got, it's historical fiction, but also, you've said, semi-autobiographical. So tell us how you developed the characters, and are any of them real? Where's that line go?
Well, I have to say, some of those characters are a composite of people that I knew that lived on Rondo and were friends of my grandparents and my mother. My mother grew up on Rondo, and she knew lots of people, and lots of people would come and visit. So I developed the characters through those people that we knew as a composite, and also out of my imagination. I know that there were plenty of people on the neighborhood that were very interesting to draw from. And so that led me to create these characters and make them as rich, because Rondo was a very rich neighborhood.
Yeah, so talk a little bit more about that too with, when we were talking about this ahead of time, you talked about this joyful, supportive community, that it was so deep and rich, and just tell us more about your experience with that.
Well, I would come to Rondo neighborhood. We lived in North Minneapolis. My mother married a man from the north side, and that was not unusual. However, there was a big rival between North Minneapolis and St. Paul. And so the men in St. Paul said, don't you rob our St. Paul girls, they're for us. But my mother was a very strong woman and decided to marry her North Side man. And so every Sunday, we would go to Grandma Essie and Grandpa Joe's. I used their names because I loved their names. And so once we traveled to St. Paul, we had friends there. I had cousins and aunts and uncles who still lived there. And we just, had a great time. And the process of going there is we had to use University Avenue, because University was the connecting point between St. Paul and Minneapolis. So that's how we come to St. Paul. And while we were there, we would go to the different stores to get our candy. And we played on the hill. My grandparents lived on a hill. And if you don't mind, I could read
Sure.
a little section of that.
Yep.
Let's see if I can find it real quick here. Okay, this is a game that the kids played, and I doubt if they play it anymore because it was quite dangerous. Okay.
Allow kids to do dangerous
Right,
things.
no more. They have helmets on their heads and
Too much
everything.
adult supervision.
Okay, here we go. Hey, what y'all doing? Shouted some of her friends. Playing King of the Hill at Zenobia Grandma's house. Wanna play? Like the Pied Piper, they attracted more children with the call. Wanna play King of the Hill? Mike, Spike, and Marvin overheard the call while playing basketball and came along, even if there were girls playing. At Grandma Essie's hill, Betty and Zenobia counted 8 friends. We want to play too. Me and Fanny knew how to play King of the Hill, said the chorus of Mookie and Fanny. Before Zenobia could say no, Betty said, yeah, come on. Not little kids, said Zenobia. We'll just let them run up and down the hill. They'll get tired and quit, said Betty. Zenobia wasn't so sure. Betty didn't have a little brother or sister, and Zenobia was responsible for any harm coming to Mookie and Fanny. She didn't want to explain to Grandma Essie or Mama about broken limbs, split lips, or knocked out teeth. 10 children of various shapes and sizes lined up at the bottom of the hill. It was not very high, but enough of a challenge for anyone to run up. It was perfect for playing King of the Hill, with a gentle slope that picked up speed when you reached the bottom. Yet, if you weren't careful, you'd bang into the wire fence that separated Grandpa Joe's yard from Mrs. Pearl's. Betty was the first to sprint to the top of the hill. Long, muscular legs kept Betty from being pushed off by the others. Even Spike and Marvin couldn't move Betty, pushing the boys away. Running fast up the hill, Zenobia charged Betty, sending her somersaulting down the hill. Zenobia planted one foot ahead, the other behind. Then Fanny came up the hill, coming behind Zenobia. But Fanny was clumsy, lost her footing, and tumbled. Next, Mike tried, but Zenobia was stronger. Spike tried tackling Zenobia, but she sidestepped him, and he landed head over heels at the bottom of the hill. Betty tried again, pushed hard, and Zenobia wobbled but recovered. This game was too intimidating for Mookie. So with Fanny, Millie, Rhonda, and Patty, the children didn't push. Instead, they rolled and skipped around the hill. Hey, Zenobia, the Johnson boys, Harry and James, came from across the street from Grandma Essie's house. They were bigger, meaner. The 13-year-old twin boys towered over and outweighed the rest of the children. They played football with the older boys. Before Zenobia could say no, Harry, the meanest of the twins, ran up the hill and smashed into Zenobia. She flew into the air, then bounced to the ground with a thud and rolled down the hill until the fence stopped her. Zenobia, Zenobia! Betty shook her shoulders. She lay face up on the ground. Mookie and Fanny's eyes showed fear no one wanted to express out loud. Zenobia couldn't speak. The breath locked inside her chest, ears ringing, the earth spinning. What are you kids doing? Zenobia, get off the ground. Mookie, Fanny, stop standing around. Move into the house. Boys and girls, time to go home. Playmates scattered like dandelion puffs in all directions. Zenobia heard Grandma's commands and staggered up off the grass. Grass stains blemished her new pedal pushers. Kids, what did I say about playing on the hill? Zenobia saw Grandma's mouth moving but couldn't form a sentence. Get inside and wash up. Dessert is ready.
I think I must have been in transition. When I was a kid, we would only do King of the Hill on snow mountains, which was a little softer anyway.
Yeah.
I don't remember ever getting a concussion. But so tell us a little bit more about the grandparents. Grandma Essie is obviously very strict. She's the disciplinarian. Grandpa Joe, I feel like in the book, is more warm-hearted. He comes out that way. But as you and I were talking, your Grandpa Joe was a little saltier. So talk about
Yes,
that mix.
My Grandpa Joe was quite a man. He was a former cowboy. He grew up in the sandhills of Nebraska. He was a rancher. His people were ranchers. And he grew up riding horses, breaking horses, doing stunts for the rodeos, the black rodeos that came through town. And he was a really strong person. But as I grew older, I noticed he wasn't that tall, but when I was small, he seemed like a giant. So as the story goes, I used some of Grandpa Joe stories because he called me his Miss Pooh. And so I can read just a little piece from this. Grandpa Joe and Zenobia. Sitting upstairs on the upstairs landing with Wonder Woman comic, Zenobia saw Essie throw the envelope on the floor and stomp on it. What was in the envelope that made her do that? She watched Essie head for the kitchen. Quiet as she could, Zenobia creeped down the stairs to the dining room table. Zenobia picked up the crinkled envelope. It was unsealed. Carefully, she pulled out the piece of paper. White with bold black lettering, Minnesota Department of Transportation and Ramsey County for the construction of interstate highway. She read, the contents are to be removed from the property, the house to be demolished in 30 days. This is your final warning. The rest of the letter she didn't understand, but this wording she did. Who were these people forcing her grandparents to leave their house, saying they were going to tear it down for an interstate? With great care, she folded the letter back into the envelope. Muffled sounds came from the kitchen. Zenobia silently stood in the doorway. Grandma Essie was at the kitchen table, her shoulders shaking, her head in her hands. She had never seen her grandma cry, and the sight frightened her. Zenobia moved away. She knew better not to ask questions. Grandma said, children should stay out of grown people's business. But why could this happen? Grandpa Joe sat relaxed in his favorite web lawn chair with plastic green and white stripes, one hand on the garden hose and the other holding a Cuban cigar. His sweating grain belt beer bottle on the ground next to the chair. Well, howdy do, Miss Pooh. Sit down with me, he said. When Zenobia was younger, she loved Winnie the Pooh and made her Grandpa Joe read it to her dozens of times. Grandpa, I'm 13. Are you always going to call me Miss Pooh? Grandpa Joe had a rumbling chuckle deep in his broad chest that burst out of him. Baby girl, you know you always going to be my Miss Pooh. Zenobia laughed too. She planted herself on the ground next to Grandpa Joe and watched the water from the green hose arc over the garden plants as he moved it back and forth, making certain everything was watered. The sun rays caught the water spray and created a rainbow. Look what you did, Grandpa. Joe smiled. He was colored by the sun, cheekbones sculptured, planes on the right and left side of his face smooth, not a wrinkle, which made it difficult to know his age. Zenobia could smell the cigar smoke that lingered on his clothes. Grandpa, can I try? Zenobia took the hose. As much as she tried, there was no rainbow. Maybe this was the moment, Zenobia thought, to ask Grandpa what was happening and what would he do. She could not pretend that something wasn't happening. Grandpa, what's an interstate? There was a long pause. Zenobia didn't know if he was going to answer. Can't keep nothing from my Pooh girl. Where'd you hear that? Zenobia couldn't tell him about the letter. it was grown-up business. I think I heard Mrs. Pearl say something about that. Wow, that was a whopper of a tale, she thought, hoping she wouldn't get caught, her mind racing. So this is what I know. There's some kind of big highway going to connect all the streets and cities and won't be stoplights. The government says they're tearing down our house and the entire Rondo Avenue. Now that's supposed to be progress according to the government letter you read. You did read it, right? Zenobia sheepishly looked at Grandpa Joe and nodded her head, yes. But why, Grandpa? Can't they go somewhere else? That I can't answer. Just don't know, Miss Pooh. Maybe, Grandpa, there's a way to save our neighborhood. Don't know that either, Zenobia. She wasn't satisfied. The letter said 30 days you must move. Where will you and Grandma live? We'll still live close by. We're not moving far. They were silent. It seemed to Zenobia that Grandpa was in a hard place for a grown-up. Zenobia, let me tell you a story about the time I was a cowboy and lived on the ranch in Nebraska. Want to hear? Grandpa was avoiding, and she didn't want to put him on the spot anymore. Maybe tomorrow she'd ask Betty if she knew anything. Of course, those are my second favorite stories besides Wonder Woman. You and your Wonder Woman. He shook his head, then started his story. You see, my pa heard about the land, the sandhills in the Nebraska territory where you could homestead. That means you got to live on the land for 10 years, and then it was yours. Ma, me, and my 9 brothers and sisters left Georgia and met Pa there. We built a sod house. There wasn't any trees on the prairie. That land was rolling hills. Nothing was green except in the early spring. You could see miles for miles in any direction. Zenobia tried to imagine a place with no trees. And what were sod houses? She'd have to look it up in the library encyclopedia. Did you have to make everything? Oh yeah, we dug wells and outhouses. What's an outhouse? We had no inside bathroom back then. Toilets were built outside. Don't think you'd like that in the wintertime. I know I didn't. It would get so cold your feet, hands, and face be frozen before you could get to the outhouse. Don't even mention your behind sticking out in the cold. I'll leave it there.
So this is maybe a good time to talk about the historical research you did. I know you did some down in Nebraska, lots of stuff up here. Talk about how you filled in all those rich details with the research.
I was very fortunate to receive a Jerome Hill fellowship in literature, which allowed me to do a lot of my research right there in Nebraska. I had never been to Western Nebraska before, and it is truly a magnificent place. We even visited my grandparents. They left in the Dust Bowl era. They didn't have access to water, so their ranch was overtaken by some German and Swiss immigrants. But they were kind enough to let us kind of roam around where my grandparents' ranch used to be. And he had 640 acres, but that was just not enough to make a living. And so my husband and I rode around Highway 83, which is the main drag that takes you through Western, the Sandhills, and it was really interesting. The house didn't, there was no more town left, and so I had to do some more research at the Sturs Museum in Grand Island, Nebraska. And that's where they ended up settling after they sold the ranch. They stayed in Grand Island, and then they migrated to St. Paul. Now, in St. Paul, I used the St. Paul history, the Ramsey County History Center, and I was able to find the house where that was torn down. I found pictures from the Minnesota Historical Society of what Rondo used to look like and how I remembered certain artifacts and what the houses looked like. And I was also able to go to, well, COVID put a damper on everything. So I had to start doing things online. And so online I found the Minnesota Department of Transportation had files of all the houses that were torn down. And I was able to find the house that my grandparents lived in. And that was quite remarkable. I also did some research at the Smithsonian history online, and I was able to find photographs of cowgirls and cowboys. And the photograph I really wanted to use was the cowgirl who was a friend of my grandfather's in the Sandhills, but unfortunately I couldn't get permission to get that photograph because she was quite the woman. She had full regalia on, and she had this beautiful Palomino horse that she was astride, and I really wanted that picture, but I had to settle for the one from the Smithsonian, which was just as rich. So
that's the one in the book, right?
That's the one in the book, and the book is filled with photographs. It was important for me to illustrate the book with photographs of what I remembered what was in the Rondo neighborhood, and how at Hallie Q. Brown, they had basketball games, and one of those basketball games my father and mother met at because Hallie Q and Sumner, the Phyllis Wheatley house, they had basketball games together, and that's how my parents met. They were St. Paul girls who did not believe in boundaries.
So speaking of no boundaries and cowgirls, do you have a reading to introduce us to Mrs. Ruby, who, I don't want to give too much away, but she was, I think, another major character in this book. That
She was. Let me see if I can put Miss Ruby. I don't want to give too much away because she's such a character. Let's see. Let's see, 74. I'll just read a couple of pages here. Ruby had moved to Rondo Avenue, smelling of lily of the valley eau de perfume, along with Franklin, named after the President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, a black and white, long-haired Heinz 57 breed, medium-sized dog. The winds of the Sandhills found Ruby in St. Paul and swirled around her body, not letting her forget the ranch left behind. Her body was wiry, short, and raw-boned. Her face the texture of smooth brown leather baked by the sun and wind. Ruby's hair, cut short, showed no use of chemical relaxers or pressing combs. She left it natural, didn't want to fuss. Franklin and Ruby adjusted to the city and sometimes dreamed of life back in the Sandhills. That life was over. The ranch and rodeo was sold, and the people she knew were gone too. Through the front window, she checked out the tiny white man with gray hair and dull gray skin slip under the front door the eminent domain letter from the Minnesota Department of Transportation. The white folks will need to drag me out of my house, Ruby said to Miss Ada Milton one day after church. Back in the Sandhills, Joe and Ruby were lovers. But the courtship reminded her of the Sandhill cranes, dance, prancing, dodging, and jumping from one thing to another, never really saying what was on each other's mind. Even though the families thought they'd marry soon, Ruby knew there was no connection. Maybe it was her father's fault. He raised her too hard. Ruby's mother died when she was 5. Maybe there were not enough women folk around to teach her the finery of keeping a man's interest, like cooking a delicious meal or mending or knitting or decorating a house. Hell, how are you gonna keep a side house clean, she thought. In the summer, cleaning meant battling the flies and the smoking haze, leaving soot on everything with a surface. But Ruby knew she could never be an Essie. It wasn't in her nature. Essie was city and Ruby was country. And if Joe wanted a city woman in his life, Ruby would let it be. So the relationship became something else. And it was good for Ruby because she remained herself. She and Joe united as friends. Leave it.
Nice. Yeah, I think it's enough to say, I mean, what I thought was really neat about her character was that adult outside of the family for Zenobia that kids so often need.
Yes.
Who had a profound influence on her that really plays out through the book.
And the book also adds other adults, because I felt, even though this is what's marketed as a juvenile book, it also appeals to many adults because children are always influenced by older people in the neighborhood. And Rondo was a neighborhood that everybody was your mother or father. So if you were acting out, somebody would say, hey, Zenobia, I'm going to tell your mama on you. So it was that kind of a neighborhood.
Yeah. So part of the process, I've never written a book, but I understand talking to people who do. There's always, violence is probably too strong of a word, but that the hard choices of what keeps in, and you've got to keep the story going, but there's all sorts of rich material that you develop. So tell us a little bit of what you wished was in the book that we would love to hear, but it just didn't fit in those pages.
It just didn't fit in. I was working with the editor at the University of Minnesota Press, and I really wanted to add some more history about Rondo before Rondo became Rondo. And it was first developed through a French-Canadian, Matisse, who was a Canadian who came to Rondo and purchased the land from Phelan because his family was facing a lot of racism. So I want to include that, and I also want to include more about Grandpa Joe. He was a little saltier than I wanted to put in. He was a great cusser, and I wanted to put some of that in, but it was going to be marketed for juveniles, so I couldn't do that, even though juveniles know a lot of language.
All right. If they've got a grandpa like that.
So so I wanted to include some history about Rondo, but it slowed down the rhythm, the pacing of the story, so I had to leave that out. But hopefully, you always cut material out as a writer to save it for another day.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about adults getting a lot out of this book, as well as young adults or middle readers. What are some other takeaways you really want people to get from this book?
Well, one of them is definitely how difficult it was for Black people to move. I mean, there was covenants and there was redlining. And so it was difficult for Black families. I mean, just the fact that Black families had a house was remarkable. And so to lose that house, that generational wealth, was significant.
So they did own the house?
Yes, they did. They owned the house. And they also, when they tried to, the government gave them a fixed fee, and because it was labeled a slum house. And poor Zenobia, she was so upset by that. And she told her mother in a letter, they said Grandpa's house is a slum house, but it's really pretty. And so this is not in the book. I wanted to put this in the book too, but it just didn't fit in. Some people were able to sue the government and were able to increase the value of their home. And because of that, my grandfather was able to purchase another house on Iglehart. But it was very difficult for Black people. Some people lost businesses. They lost a lot of potential wealth that they could pass on to their children, which...
So much of Ruby's anger was she had put her life savings into the house.
Exactly.
She owned it outright, and now she's renting.
Right,
after
she had to rent. And she also moved. I don't want to give too much away.
Yeah.
But,
Well, we know that she loses her house.
right, she did lose her house. And maybe I could read just a little bit of that.
I was going to say, if you've got one or two more readings, and then I'll open it up for some questions.
Okay, I'll just see if I can find that. Where Ruby, let me see. I didn't mark this one because I didn't really think I was going to read that, but let's see. You'd think I would be able to find it just like that, but I can find it. Okay. Okay, here I think I found it. The sit-in. Spitting rain annoyed Zenobia as she walked to Moshe's corner store. Grandma Essie had wrapped 2 quarters and a $50 in a handkerchief and stuffed them in Zenobia's pedal pusher pocket. That annoyed her too. Why was she being treated like a kid? Grandma wrote a list. She didn't expect Zenobia to remember bread for sandwiches, a 1/4 pound of coffee, and a 1/2 pint of cream for her coffee. Grandma couldn't drink coffee without cream. On the way back from the store in the middle of the block, Zenobia saw Mrs. Ruby Pearl gathering wood planks in the muddy rubble from one demolished house. Her trademark bib overalls were covered in mud. What's the matter with her? Mrs. Pearl always said colored women could do whatever they wanted. Don't let nobody tell you that you can't do something. That's bullshit. And don't start cussing like that or Joe and Essie won't let you come over anymore. Just store them up until you need to use them when you're older. Gotta mind your grandparents. Mrs. Pearl was good at giving advice, Zenobia thought. Ruby looked up. Zenobia, come help me put these planks in my wheelbarrow. Wear these gloves so you won't get splinters. I'm going to pay you 50 cents for helping me too, said Mrs. Pearl. Oh, that's okay. You don't have to pay me. I'll help, said Zenobia. Oh, yes, I do. Your labor is worth something, and don't you forget it. You'll not work for free for me or anyone else. The temptation of earning 50 cents was too great for Zenobia to resist. Oops. She remembered her home training. Thank you, Mrs. Pearl. I can't stay too long, though. Oh, don't worry. It won't take long. If you help me put the wood in the house, I'll give you another 50 cents. Wow, Zenobia thought. She received dimes and nickels for tasks done at home, never quarters. Now she'd be able to buy new Wonder Woman comic books before Betty. And don't be buying candy with that money either. Don't want to rot out your teeth and make Dr. Brown richer than he already is, said Mrs. Pearl as the wood pile grew larger in the wheelbarrow. In Ruby's house, Zenobia put Grandma Essie's groceries on the dining room table close to the kitchen door. She and Ruby pushed the stacked wheelbarrow to the living room where the carpet was removed. They dumped it all on the floor. Ruby's rocking chair, usually sitting on the porch, was placed on top of the planks. She hammered the nails into the rocking chair rails and threw to the exposed wood planks of the living room floor. "What are you doing with your rocking chair, Mrs. Pearl?" Zenobia couldn't keep quiet any longer about this strange activity. "This is my sit-in, Zenobia. You know what that is, don't you?" "Yes, ma'am, they're doing it down south. I've seen it on TV." Zenobia paused. "So this is a real sit-in? Will this be on TV, Mrs. Pearl?" "I hope it will. Can you stay longer and help me hold the chair while I nail it down more of the wood planks on the floor? And help me tie the rope around the chair before them police bulldoze me along with my house?" "Wow, just like down south," said Zenobia. Mrs. Pearl nodded her head in agreement. This was scary, thought Zenobia. She remembered the story about Emmett Till in Jet magazine. Mama and Daddy were upset, said it was the worst thing they'd ever seen. What was wrong with white folks? They had long conversations about whether she should see the magazine of the young boy, and they finally agreed. And it was the most terrifying and horrible killing to happen to anyone, let alone a teenager. "Come on, girl, the sheriff coming. And with the police, too, gonna move me out of my house. Eminent domaining me out of my own house. I bought and paid for, damn it. This is gonna happen to my grandma and grandpa, too, isn't it? Yes, everyone on the block must leave. You saw what they did to the Johnson's house. Come on, girl, hold the rocking chair in place while I pounded down these wood planks." Using her knowledge of roping and tying up steers, Ruby instructed Zenobia how to wrap the surrounding rope around the rocking chair. "Do it good and tight. Wrap it around my legs and arms. Wrap it around and underneath the plank and hammer it down. Hurry up, girl, they coming." "I'm hurrying, Mrs. Pearl." Down south, white folks using water hoses and their vicious dogs. At least that's not happening here yet. "What about Franklin?" asked Zenobia. "I put him in the garage. Don't want them shooting my dogs, too." I'll leave it there.
So you got some salty language in.
Some salty.
Are there any questions out here that people have, or comments, or what have you? Yeah.
I can shout.
No. Everybody can hear you better this way.
Sure. How many houses were destroyed in the end?
600. That's houses and businesses.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay.
I've had the honor of touring Greenwood Rising in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which that was about 1920, 21.
Yes.
So this in Rondo was in the late 50s
60s.
to
60s. 60s.
And then what was the timing for 35? That was
Also,
right, wasn't it?
Also about the same time.
Yep.
Simultaneously.
Yes.
Oh my, okay, I just wanted to talk on a timeline. Thank you very much.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, all of these scenes were 1963, is that right, Deborah?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. The highway, the interstate was finished in 1968. So in between that, 94 went through South Minneapolis and also North Minneapolis. Parts of Washington Avenue were destroyed too.
Ms. Stone, I would like to know, what was the most difficult part of this process for you, of writing this book?
I think the most difficult part of it was writing about the people and what happened to them, what they lost, and also knowing that this was not just happening to Rondo, but I listed in the book about 25 or 30 different towns throughout the United States that were also, their neighborhoods, black neighborhoods, were destroyed. Tremy in New Orleans, Detroit, Black Bottom. Those were just a few, but I could have listed like pages of the different neighborhoods that were destroyed by the interstate. But that was probably the most difficult part, to relive thinking about all of those people who lost their cherished neighborhoods and their homes and their businesses. Thank you for that.
Okay, I lived through this. I stood in the trench in 1961. I had come home from college for a weekend. It was Thanksgiving weekend, and we were at a friend's house. And I walked and climbed over the fence and went down into the trench. And I looked to the left, which was St. Paul, and I looked to the right for Minneapolis. And I tried to figure out what the hell this was going to look like. As time went by, I found myself going back to St. Paul, because during that time you were socializing and partying and going back and forth between cities. And you could watch the progress as time goes by. I lived in the Rondo neighborhood from 1948 about until 56, 55. All of your description of what the community was like as far as people is concerned is right on. I mean, we were all very much interested in themselves, ourselves and the community. But there were a lot of people. I moved out of the neighborhood probably, like I said, 56, 57, and the whole neighborhood was quite upset about it. But what you describe in the book is pretty much right on. I mean, it was a hard time. It was a hard time for a lot of people. I lived down on Carroll and Oxford, and it was an interesting neighborhood. Actually, it was a mixed race neighborhood, but and then unfortunately I moved to Minneapolis, South Minneapolis. A year later, what are they doing?
Yep.
Building 35W, block and a half behind the house and lot. And the same situation happened. I mean, they just went in there and said, "Hey, we're taking the property. Get out. Here's some money. Bye." And the whole process was not the best, but it's history, and I don't know that there's ever going to be any way to look at it other than that. But I'll tell you, a lot of people were very upset.
Yes, they were.
Just hand it to Will.
Grandpa used a lot of salty language.
So as I understand it, Rondo wasn't just houses and people. There were community institutions along the street, places where people went to church and gathered and so on. But it all happened before I knew anything about St. Paul. Do you remember can you talk at all about that part of the Rondo neighborhood? It was more than just the people's houses, but also the institutions.
Right, the businesses, the churches. I was too young to go to the VFW, but that was a very important institution. There were restaurants. Yes, so it wasn't just the houses, it was the businesses too. There were doctors, there were lawyers. It was a very self-contained neighborhood because of segregation. So because it was segregated, it was important for the professionals. The professionals lived in Rondo. They had their businesses in Rondo. And so black people, I never saw a white person until this man came to my grandparents' house talking about eminent domain.
I have a question. I really appreciated the dialogue in your book.
Thank you.
It just made the characters sparkle. And I wonder, is that a hard part of the writing process? Or is it something you get excited about? I get to write dialogue today.
I have to say I get really excited about it because I worked in the theater for a very long time, and theater, people know dialogue. We work with dialogue all the time. So dialogue, I know some writers no, but I love dialogue, so. And it seems to really shape the characters too, when you can add some dialogue to them.
Well, and you read it really well too. So you can tell that
Thank
you've
you.
got acting.
Thank you.
I just want to, your reading is fantastic, but these neighborhoods, Rondo and South Minneapolis, it was done with intent. I mean, it wasn't just willy-nilly that this is.
It was a part of the Eisenhower policy.
Exactly. The post-World War II.
Right.
United States.
He loved what he saw in Germany, and so he wanted to he wanted to replicate it.
Yeah, urban renewal.
Right.
And there's an actual map, which I believe you probably have seen, where the Rondo neighborhood, the whole neighborhood is labeled slum.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
And that was the only way they could do it, because they had alternative routes they could have taken.
Absolutely.
But this was, as I said in the preface, these people had no political power. They didn't have the access to power that other neighbors. It couldn't have gone anywhere else but there. So that's the reason why
Yeah.
it went through.
Same thing in terms of 35.
Right.
35 went through working class neighborhood, mixed race neighborhood. The closer you got, further out, maybe further south, of course. Same thing with 94 now. She mentioned it goes through and up. But the core of it that goes through the city went through working class neighborhoods.
Exactly.
And people from in the income of working class people don't have the income to fight City Hall, you know, to forge a lawsuit.
Right. I think this lady behind you wants have. Oh. Oh.
So,
But we do have other questions, so.
Yeah.
I just wanted, there's a wonderful book written by a professor out in LA, and I always forget his name, but it's about this entire process, and Rondo and St. Paul is mentioned, 35 is lightly mentioned, but all across the United States. New Orleans, as you mentioned, LA, it didn't just focus on African American, of course, Latino people were also in the LA near the barrio. That was focused on for the freeways they have up there.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think you might have been referring to the Richard Rothstein book.
No.
Oh, no, different one. Anyway.
Hi,
Hello.
I would like to know, when you originally began writing this book, was your intention for it to be for adults or for youth? And so how?
You know, that's an interesting question, because the book went through many iterations. It was going to be a series of essays. That didn't seem to work. And I tried to work it through with an adult narrator. That was really dull. And so I went to a workshop in Rhode Island called Callaloo. And so when I was workshopping it, one of the instructors said to me, he said, you know, you should try this as a young adult voice. And I thought, oh shoot, I wanted to make it a world-class Pulitzer Prize winning. And here it's now gonna be for young kids. But the more I got into it, I really liked it. I really liked the voice of Zenobia. And it reminded me so much of how young girls worked in the neighborhood. You know, how we played, what books, you know, going to the library, you know, having, you know, playing, you know, tag and all these things that young girls do. And I thought, you know, I need to write a book about young girls. And so that's how it developed. And I'm so glad I did, because now I'm getting so much PR. I'm running around like crazy trying to fulfill, as you notice, my voice kind of cracks and stuff because I've been reading all over the Twin Cities. And I'm so glad that I did write this. And I'm so glad I did it because the cover gives the energy of what I remembered about the Rondo neighborhood. And the cover is from a artist who used to live in the Rondo neighborhood. Melvin Smith is his name. And he's an incredible artist.
Any last? Yeah, we've got a couple over here. Go around.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this book. I had a chance to read it already, and I really love it. So thank you. And I'm really glad that you did end up writing it in an adult voice because it is really lovely to see through Zenobia's eyes. But I had sort of a two-part question, if I can get away with it. But one part of it is more serious. So you talked a little bit about your process researching and also how autobiographical this is. And I'm curious about how it felt for you to sort of engage both the personal narrative and really, I think something that can be very emotional, and then also having to treat that in some ways as a sort of research project and going into archives in a way that often are more sort of isolated from the very personal elements and people's materials that they contain. But then the sort of more maybe fun, lighter part of the question is I love Zenobia's writing about Wonder Woman and what she hopes Wonder Woman will come and do for the Rondo neighborhood. I won't spoil it. But I was curious if Wonder Woman was an important part of your growing up, since she's such an important part in this narrative. Thank you.
No, that was part of my imagination as a writer. Unfortunately, I did not read comic books when I was 13 years old. I was more into the adventure books of Jack London. Matter of fact, I got kicked out of the adult reading library because I kept wanting to read. And so I had to get a permission slip from my mother saying it was okay if I went to the adult reading area. But yeah, I just thought that Wonder Woman was really would be an interesting part to put in, because all the other books for young girls were, kind of sappy actually. So I wanted to have a strong woman comic book for her. Thank you for that question.
My question to you is, those 600 people that were displaced from Rondo, where did they go?
That's a good question.
Except all those ugly houses they put up that were supposed to look like suburban houses.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Could you put your phone down, please?
I think it's something out there. I don't know.
So they displaced them on each side of the freeway.
Yeah, I can't give you an answer for that. I don't know.
You mentioned Englehart for your grandpa.
Yeah, my grandparents were fortunate enough to buy a house in Englehart, but and some people were able to stay, in the neighborhood, but due to redlining, it was very difficult.
I can maybe add a little bit.
Town, Aurora, St. Anthony, either side of the freeway.
Yeah.
When I can just speak a little bit to the 35W in Minneapolis experience. When we had the Human Toll exhibit, it was months, I think, of research to try to figure out where the houses went and where they never really knew where the people went. But we had this huge graphic that showed which houses moved and where they moved to and which houses were demolished. A lot of the movement was out into the suburbs. They would pick up a house and move it out a couple suburbs away. But it was really complicated, and it was really hard to track where the people went when they were doing that research.
Yeah.
I have a question. Would you consider exploring writing a book about the original cowboys?
I would love to.
I'm so intrigued and fascinated by that, and I find myself even educating people of color and reminding them that the original cowboys
We're black people.
people correct. And
Yes.
I just find it so interesting. I'm intrigued by it. I would definitely buy that book as well.
All right. Thank you for that. Because I went down the rabbit hole when I was doing the research. And I have a ton of books about the Black West and who the settlers and everything, how they, where they went. And so, yeah, that's on my agenda.
I think that might be a good place for us to end with.
All right. Thank
inspiring
you.
for the next book. I've got a couple housekeeping things, and then I'm going to pass it over to Pam Moore, the chair of our board. Thank you all again for coming and for your donations this evening. They really help a lot. We've got surveys over there on the side, and we've got several board members. Pam, Nicole is there. John and Becca are in the back. We've got more surveys. So if we run out here, we can refill them. But we would really love it if you could give us some feedback about the program tonight, because it helps us with grant making. It helps us with knowing what we need to do better and what we are doing okay with. We have more books, and Debra's going to move from this chair to the chair out there. So if you don't have a book yet, you can pick one up and Debra can sign it. If you already have a book but weren't able to get it signed ahead of time,
I will sign it.
She's got her pen. So she'll be here for a little bit longer for some more chatting and signing and what have you. And let me pass it over to Pam Moore.
Excuse me.
All right, so Debra, before you sneak away.
Thank you.
Debra.
Don't sneak away.
Oh, don't sneak away.
Thank you so much for this book. And thank you for your service on the board.
Thank you.
Because Debra is doing an amazing job on the board, but then also this book is outstanding, and we appreciate you being here tonight and providing this wonderful reading for our audience. So everyone, please give Debra a round. And I want to thank you for being here this evening and coming out and supporting this effort. I cannot ever get up on stage in front of a group of people without thanking the wonderful staff of the Hennepin History Museum. They do an outstanding job on bringing programs and keeping this wonderful institution alive. And so thank you to John and Michelle who are here with us this evening, but then also the staff that put together wonderful exhibits like the one behind you and the two that are upstairs, and then the ones that we are able to do in the community. So we have a fantastic staff. So if you find it in your heart to become a member of this museum, if you're not yet a member, please do that, or at least follow us on social media. You can find us on all the opportunities, Facebook, Instagram, all the things. So please join us in the social media, or just keep an eye out for us. We have a great magazine. We have a fantastic newsletter. So just pay attention. Hennepin History Museum is up to wonderful and great things. So thank you for being here tonight, and we're so grateful for you to be here. So
Yeah, one more thing. Since you mentioned social media, for the last 3 years for Give to the Max Day, we've been sampling with community members to tell stories. And this year's theme is Why is History Important Now? We've got some salty ones. We've got some powerful things coming. So keep an eye out for that, because we've got some really inspiring people saying important things right now. So we're proud of that in the next coming couple of weeks. So thanks again. Enjoy the rest of the evening.